What's up guys, Asian here with another PTS video, and this is going to be the last PTS video before week 3 of the PTS, which is when a lot of the big balance changes happen. So hopefully everything in this video will remain the same in week 3 coming up, I believe, by the time this video is released, either tomorrow or the day afterwards. And hopefully everything in this video makes sense and is still relevant after week 3 patch notes are released, but if it is not, then obviously I will go ahead and revisit this and re-examine everything here. So this particular video, we're going to be taking a look at Stonefist, the new and improved Stonefist for Dragonknights. So Stonefist right now on the live server is a fairly rarely used ability. It is a magicka ranged ability, so you're able to cast it at range. The range is, I believe, 28 meters. Basically what it is it deals magic damage, and the two morphs, Stone Giant and Obsidian Shard, are either a damage morph with a stun or a healing morph. So Obsidian Shard on the live server, when you kind of throw it out, it deals a little bit of magic damage and it also heals somebody. And then Stone Giant, which is the damage morph, it deals magic damage and also stuns, and if they are stunned already, it deals 100% more damage, basically double damage. In Dragonhold, it has been changed into a spammable for stamina Dragonknight. So that is the big change here. Stamina Dragonknights finally get a class spammable. So taking a look at Stone Giant and Stonefist itself. So let's go ahead and take a look at the base ability first. Let me quickly. Okay, there we go. So the base ability Stonefist uses stamina, and it deals physical damage, and it applies a stack of what's known as Stagger, which is a new debuff that is unique to Dragonknights. So enemies that are affected by Stagger 5 times are stunned for 3 seconds and have all stacks of Stagger removed from them. Now, the way this is worded and the way that it seems to be applied on a dummy seems to be that if the enemy is not able to be stunned, you are able to have those stacks of Stagger pretty much remain. I have not tested this out yet on any sort of elite mob which are immune to stun, but that's kind of the way the wording sounds. So it does seem like you'll be able to maintain those 5 stacks of Stagger if your enemy that you are using this on is not able to be stunned. The Obsidian Shard morph pretty much has remained unchanged except for a few minor tweaks. So it deals flame damage instead of magic damage, and it heals 2 people rather than 1 person on live. So a little bit of a buff to Dragonknight healers, but we're not really interested in Obsidian Shard. We're interested more in Stone Giant instead. The Stone Giant basically more or less acts like a little bit of a Molten Whip version when it comes to the secondary effects. So it still deals physical damage and it still applies a stack of Stagger to them, this time for 12 seconds. It still costs stamina. But the stacks of Stagger now will now increase the damage that the enemy takes by 25 per stack. And you still have that stun sort of secondary effect here, where if you apply Stagger 5 times, you can stun them for 3 seconds and have all stacks of Stagger removed. Now, of course, very similar to what I mentioned earlier, it seems like bosses, because they're not stunnable, will always have those 5 stacks of Stagger, so you'll always have an increase of 125 additional damage taken. Note that this is damage taken and not necessarily weapon damage. So this is obviously going to be weaker than Molten Whip, which adds weapon damage, but it's still a nice bonus nonetheless. And this does obviously affect all abilities because it is a damage taken debuff. It's just a flat increase rather than a percentage increase like a major or minor vulnerability. And so naturally the question is, how good is this as a stamina spammable? So what I did was basically I compared this Stone Giant with the classic stamDK spammable, both likely in Scalebreaker and in Dragonhold moving forward, Noxious Breath. So basically everything remained exactly the same, except I swapped out Stone Giant for Camouflaged Hunter here when I was testing Stone Giant. So when I was using Noxious Breath as a spammable, I went with Camouflaged Hunter as my 4th ability slot here in order to get that additional weapon damage bonus. I did 2 parses for each, one with sort of a kind of best guess CP, and then the second parse was with what Constellations gave me as a optimized CP setup. So this here first parse here is 26k, or 69k, and this is using Noxious Breath as our spammable. So you can see here all of the parse information is right here. Nothing really stands out too much. Just Noxious Breath obviously is our spammable, so we have a lot of hits here. In terms of actual crits, seems to be fall in line pretty much more or less with what our weapon crit is, 61.2%. Can't really use critical here because we have Arms Reliquary, which obviously doesn't crit, which will skew this lower. Just taking a look at the crits real fast, it seems pretty much on the dot with 61% or so. This other parse here, 70.3, was also Noxious Breath as our spammable here. This one, I believe, was with a kind of best guess CPs. The 69k was with the best constellation CP. A little bit of a difference here. And again, just taking a quick look down the crits, Flames of Oblivion had a little bit lower than average compared to what our actual crit should be, but everything else seems to fall a little bit less, a little bit lower on the crit RNG. We're sitting at around 55 for poison injection, barb trap a little bit low, 57. So this could be a little bit higher if we had a little bit better RNG with the crits, but generally speaking, not that bad. So this was Noxious Breath, so we have 69k and 70.3k. Now you can see here that the two Stonefists, they're quite a bit higher. So we have 73.4k for the first Stone Giant parse here. And you can see here that the average and max hits for Stone Giant are in general higher than in Noxious Breath. So again, this is Noxious Breath parse, 27.1 was our average with a max of 44k. Stone Giant on the other hand had an average of 32.2k with a max of 56.5k. If we take a look at all the other averages and max hits, take a look at max hits generally speaking, because that's going to be a better indication of how much damage you're actually doing with each ability. Light attacks 27.5, compared to here 26.1, Reliquin 9.7, 10.6, Arrow Barrage just over 10k, this just under 10k. So obviously the Stone Giant Stagger is improving our overall max hits by a small margin. Obviously going to be a little bit more than 125 just because of all the damage modifiers, but it does seem to be making a noticeable effect here. So Stone Giant definitely going to be a powerful spammable here. 73.4 was the first one. This was the best guess CP. For optimized CP, 73.1k. So we're looking at about a 3k difference between Noxious Breath as a spammable versus Stone Giant as a spammable. Now obviously the next question is sustain. If you go ahead and go back to our abilities here, you can see Noxious Breath costs 1,939 stamina versus Stone Giant, which costs 2,960 stamina. So you can anticipate having more sustain issues running Stone Giant here. And if we go ahead and take a look at the number of heavy attacks we did 12 heavy attacks here with the Noxious Breath spammable, 11 with the Noxious Breath spammable, 11 with the Stone Giant spammable, 11 with the Stone Giant spammable. So in terms of number of heavy attacks done, not that big of a difference here. We go ahead and take a look at our overall resources for stamina. Take away our DPS. You can see this is the Stone Giant, one of the Stone Giant parses. Its sustain was pretty bad, especially towards the end here. But if we go ahead and take a look at the Noxious Breath spammable, not that big of a difference. We never dipped down to 0 like we did with the Stone Giant parse. The other Stone Giant parse where we hit 0 quite a bit more times here. Another Noxious Breath parse here where we didn't quite hit the 0. So Noxious Breath is going to be a little bit easier to sustain. As you can tell, we didn't quite hit 0 with Noxious Breath parses versus our Stone Giant parses where we hit 0 at the very least once on each parse. So you're trading off a little bit of sustain for damage when it comes to Stone Giant. Would I recommend running Noxious Breath for this reason? Personally, not really. The fact that it's about 3k more, and I could probably push out a little bit more DPS with that, so it could be up to 4k more DPS running Stone Giant compared to Noxious Breath. I don't think it's worth it, especially when you consider that the actual difference in sustain in terms of number of heavy attacks that I did wasn't actually that much. So I would say Stone Giant, definitely the new spammable for stamDKs. stamDKs anticipate just chucking rocks at bosses from now on. And it does seem like, at the very least based on this parse, that Stagger is not removed if an enemy is immune to being stunned. So for boss fights, you should be able to maintain those 5 stacks of Stagger in order to get the additional damage taken debuff. But that concludes this video here. For those of you guys who are stamDK mains, I am not a stamDK main personally. For my DPS, I typically do a Magicka Warden as my DPS main. So all you guys out there who do main stamDKs, let me know how you feel about this change now that you have a class Spammable in Stone Giant, whether you think you'll use it or you'll stick with Noxious Breath. But beyond that, that concludes this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative. Hopefully this will not change in week 3, but if it does, I will revisit this. Again, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.